Hello! Welcome to our Succulent Dreamcatcher tutorial. So in your kits you should have a lovely reef, a big handful of suckies and string of beans, some sphagnum moss, and then all your goodies to help you create. So we've got your white and natural twine, we've got your permanent marker to help you start off, some scissors, and then finally you'll have some tacky glue and a paintbrush to help stick your suckies on. Let's get started. So to begin with, we're going to start off with our Dreamcatcher pattern, which is probably the most time consuming of all. So unraveling your twine to begin with, we're going to mark our 8 points of our Dreamcatcher. So you can see here I've used my string as a ruler, so I've done a big dash on the top, and then again this down the bottom. So I've used that string to help make sure I've got direct top to bottom, side to side, and then we're going to go through and do our diagonals. Now this is going to be the back of your Dreamcatcher as well, so don't stress about big black lines. And then go through and count, make sure you've got 8 points. And then, picking a top point, any point really, you're going to tie a nice double knot at the top, leaving a bit of a tail because you will be using that later. So moving on to the second point, what you'll do is you can see here, I've held my finger, wrapping around the reef, and then I'm tucking back under the little sort of slit that you've created. Onto the third one, around and under. Around and under. Obviously it's quite sped up at the moment, otherwise it'd be a very time consuming tutorial. But you can also see that they've all got a nice amount of tension, so you want to ensure that it's nice and tense, kind of like a guitar string. Give it a pluck and it should be nice and tight. But not ridiculously tight, you want there to be enough, so there's a little tiny bit of slack. You'll see when I move on to the next row how I go about that. So we're back up to the top now. What you want to do is the same top point around, but before going under your side, you're going to catch the first original sort of slit that you created. So you're going to catch that one, bring it over, and then you'll catch the other side. So it brings the first part and the last part that you did together into the middle. And then you'll use your little tail, once you've pulled it all through, to tie off a nice double knot right at the top point there. Beautiful. Now, moving along, what we're going to do is we're going to be working in the middle point of each of our original points. So you can see here, we've found our middle point and we're doing our wrap over. So you're just going front to behind. And then you're going to be tying a nice tight knot right on that center point of our line. So you can see I'm creating that loop, and then I'll loop back through itself. Just like how you tie, the end of a balloon or just a standard knot. And then you're going to pull it tight on that middle point of your string. So that way it's not going to slip along the line as you go through and do the rest of your pattern. So that's good to go now. You can see we've got our middle point. And then we're going to do the same thing on each of the middle points, but we're not going to be knotting now. So it's just that simple front to back wrap over, making little triangles each time. Again, making sure you keep a nice even tension, because that will throw out your Dreamcatcher pattern. So you can see at the end I've got this nice symmetrical star. And now we're going to be connecting it back together at the top again. So that little half moon shape, you can see we've caught that. You've gone through it, and then you're going to just do a nice tight double knot right at that intersecting point there. And if you feel like the first knot hasn't done a good job, then feel free to go and do it again. So think of when you're tying a balloon, you wrap it around to create that circle, and then you loop the end back through it to finalize that knot. This part's tricky. You do want to have it gripped with one hand so that way you don't lose any of the slack. And now I'm just going through and doing another double knot to show you. Sweet, looks pretty good. So now what we're gonna do is just the exact same thing that we were doing just before, finding our middle point and slipping it, but you can see here that that little moon shape got slipped. So if that happens, just pull your knot across and then just go through and do each middle point again. Now this bit here is a little tricky. You can see we've got to catch that little left triangle at the top there before we move back on to catching the center points of each of the triangles that we've made. And don't worry if the top looks a bit wonky to begin with. It always looks a bit funnier than the rest. And we're just going through and doing that same repetitive pattern now, so no more knots, no more tricks. You just catch each of your triangles at those center points. So obviously you're creating triangles, but what were once triangles are now diamonds as you progress. So you can see that first layer, they're sort of diamond shapes, and the layer that you just create has got that little triangle shape to it, if that makes sense. It is a bit hard to explain via just talking. And pretty much you just keep doing that same thing, being really careful not to miss any of your little triangles. You can see there that what happens is it creates kind of like a trapezium shape or something. You want to make sure that you're always making little triangles. No trapeziums, no squares, just triangles. If you see any of those weird shapes pop up, it probably means you've missed one of your little triangles. It happens a lot more often as you get smaller. You can see here how tiny those little triangles are that we're having to catch now. And sometimes they sort of slip away to the point where you can't see them. So you've really got to make sure that you're keeping watch of that pattern as it goes along. If you familiarize yourself with the sort of the pattern that goes on with the Dreamcatcher, it makes it easier to identify if you've missed something. Going all the way, and when you have finished, obviously it depends on how big you want your circle to be. You want to get back up to that top point again where you've got the knots at the top, and you're simply, just like we've been doing the other ones, just tying off exactly where you've finished. So you're going to hold it in place, and you're going to create that loop with your finger and then stick the end through that loop. But not there yet. Here we go. So around the finger, back under the little loop, and then through that hole that you've created to do your final knot. So again, just think of the easy balloon tie. Think of tying off a balloon, because sometimes, even myself, it's like you forget to tie knots. It happens all the time. So just keep going back to that balloon tie. That'll help you with your knots along the way. And for the end one, we're going to do a double knot. Really tight, you don't want your Dreamcatcher pattern slipping. And then finally we're going to go through and trim our little tails, ensuring there's about a centimetre, half a centimetre's left. You don't want to cut it too close to the knot because it will unravel. It's no fun. Awesome. Now's the time to just go through and adjust anything if you notice it doesn't look right. But ours is looking great. So moving on, we're going to be doing our moss now. This is where it starts to get a bit messy. What you want to do is grab your natural twine and your tacky glue, and you can see here that we're just painting on our glue on that sort of half section. Just like a big smiley face. And this is just going to ensure that when we pop our moss on now, that it's going to stick on place nicely. You can see here I'm plopping some on. You want to ensure there's a good amount of thickness so that the succulent stems can sit in there. You don't want it hitting the reef straight away. Mine's a good amount of thickness. What I'm going to do now is wrap it with my twine. So I've done a knot up one side, and then what I'm going to do is wrap in one direction with about 2 to 3 fingers widths in between each of my wraps. This ensures that you've just got good coverage and you haven't got big gaps in between, because we're going to be wrapping up, and then on the way back we're going to be wrapping in the opposite direction to create that crisscross effect. And again, that just ensures there's plenty of surface area covered with that twine to hold it in place. tying a big double knot at the beginning. Sweet, looks pretty good. I'm just gonna go through and trim all that little excess moss off, give it a bit of a clean, and then you also want to do a bit of a shake test with it before you move on to the suckies. You don't want big clumps of moss falling off. So here you can see we've got 5 strands of beans, and I've just arranged them sort of longest to shortest. There's one long one, and then the two sets on the sides are shorter and then shorter again. So I'm just pulling out all my suckies. And for now, I'm just figuring out which ones I want to go in the middle. I'm just having a play. I always like to put one directly in the middle of my moss. It's one of the bigger ones. And to attach it, what you want to do is you just blob it in the glue, or you just use your paintbrush to dab it on the end, and then you just push it into the moss. So here I am using scissors to create a bit of a hole, so you know it's going deep into that moss. So I've glued on my first one. Now I'm just going through and just sitting stuff there to get a good feel of what I want before I commence onto the gluing stage. And I'm starting off with my big, moving on to my mediums, and then you'll see on sort of the tips and the ends, that's when I put my baby succulents. So it's all just about trial and error. I've seen a lot of people do different things in our workshops. They do smallest to biggest, or actually that's all I can think of is the smallest to biggest. But there's all these different ways you can arrange it, so you don't have to do exactly what we've done. This is all just sort of, you know, personal preferences to what I like doing. Awesome, it's looking good. Now we're just going to go in through and add glue to everything. So you can see here I'm just popping it on the ends, or you can just put it in the hole with the paintbrush. But as I moved along, I actually found it quite effective to just dip your succulents in there as well. Makes it a very quick process doing that. And as you glue it, you sort of want to apply a good amount of pressure to ensure they're all clustered together and stuck in well. Now you can see here we're doing quite a clustered look, but if you guys like, you can leave a bit of space for your suckies. It's completely up to you guys. When it comes, so we'll talk a bit about succulent care, I guess. You can see the succulents are planted into moss, and the glue surprisingly doesn't do anything to harm them. It pretty much blocks the root growth for a little bit, but because succulents hold that moisture, it only takes a little bit of time before they push through and start searching for that moisture, and they're ridiculously resilient. So basically what you want to do is give them a good spritz about once or twice a week, and that way the moss will absorb all that moisture and then dry out quickly, allowing for the succulents to sit in that dry moss. They do not like wet feet. The beans, however, which I think we're going to be moving on to, they are a bit different. You can see they've got little nodes on them, and that's their roots. So you do want to spray them along the lengths, maybe 2-3 times a week, to ensure they're getting that moisture until they establish into the moss. So moving on, you can see I've laid them out longest in the middle, just like we did with our big succulent in the middle, and then you're going to do shorter and shorter again. I've left about 2 fingers length width in between my cuttings. So I've put my hole under my succulents but on top of the reef, nice and deep, and then you just dip your beans and push it up into the holes. And I go through and just add a little dab on each of the ends. At each of the spots attached to the moss, just to ensure they're nice and secure. These are the ones that are hanging, so they'll be a bit more, there'll be a bit more weight to them. So the suckies are done, it's looking fantastic. And the final thing is to just do your little hanger. Of course, I have a specific way to go about it, but you guys can do it however else you like. So you should be able to use the rest of your twine. Well, that is our tutorial done. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. I talked a lot in this tutorial. I hope you all had a fantastic time and made the most beautiful dream catchers. We hope to see all your pictures on Facebook. Thank you, everyone.